So in this video, I just want to talk about my reasoning for not using this QNAP TBS-464. After only around 3 months of usage, it is now back in its original packaging. And right off the bat, it's not really a bad server. It's actually quite a nice little server. But the biggest issue I have is just noise and heat. And that's one of the things that I actually thought this one would be quite good, because it is strictly M.2 NVMe SSDs. It does have a little small fan in there. And to begin with, that little fan didn't really spin all that fast. So it can go up to around 6,500 RPMs, and at that point it is very loud. So where I placed this one here is on a shelf pretty high up, so really not the most ideal situation. And I also have other NAS servers that it is kind of sitting on top of, so it is squeezed in between a server and a shelf, but it does have plenty of ventilation on each side, because it does suck cold air in from the left side and blow it out of the right side. Or is it the other way around? I can't really remember, but it does suck air in from one of the sides and then blow it out the other side. So it's very important that, of course, there is nothing blocking here, the side of the server, and I did not have anything blocking there. So I couldn't really understand why it was getting so hot. It does get very hot to the touch here on the top of the server. Let's actually just get it out of this packaging. So here we have the server. Like I said, have only really been used for 3 months, and it does get very hot to the touch here on the top of the server. For whatever reason, I don't really have anything running to its full potential. I have around 5 Docker containers running, and the CPU is pretty close to idle most of the times. So maybe up into the 10%, 5% utilization. I did use it as cloud storage for my photos from my phone. So whenever those photos were imported into my library or into the storage here, it would also generate thumbnails and also find people and objects and so on in those photos. And for that, I actually have a Coral unit here connected to the server just to help out with all the AI. The CPU was only really taxing or used to its full potential when it was actually doing those kind of tasks, like creating thumbnails and doing AI recognition on photos. Most of the times, like 80–90% of the times, it would just be close to idle, and still it got just so hot on the top, as well as the fan quickly got up to the like 4,000 RPMs, and when it's up to like the 4,000 RPMs, it actually gets quite loud, and it did also get up into the close to 6,000 RPM. And for whatever reason, the CPU didn't really get all that hot, maybe up until 65 degrees Celsius. So when the fan was ramped up to like 4,000 or 6,000 RPMs, it will just kind of stay there, even though the CPU temperature went down to like the 55 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Celsius again. The fan will just constantly stay at those 4,000 or 6,000 RPMs. Very, very, very loud, louder than all my other servers, which have like mechanical hard drives running 24/7. So it just became a little too audible for me, even though it is in a different room. It just became very loud. That's my main concern, at least where I use this device here. Like I said, squeezed in between servers and a shelf. Still plenty of air ventilations in the side, but it doesn't really have the most ventilations in the top and the bottom, but shouldn't really need so, because there's no like ventilation in the top of the server. You can see it's just a piece of plastic. It does have a little bit of air ventilations here in the bottom, but it does also have those rubber feet. And like I said, it does, I believe, blow air out here and suck air in from the other side here. So as long as there is nothing blocking the sides of this server, it shouldn't really be an issue, and it should be able to squeeze in between other devices in a server rack, for instance. So for using this little server, I wouldn't really recommend using it inside a server rack, unless maybe you have ventilation inside your server rack. I do not have that in my server rack. I do have 4 small NAS servers with 4 disks each. All of them have 120mm fan in the back, just blowing air through the hard drives. Those I can have running without any issues. But this one here, it just got so hot in that environment. So definitely, I think this is more designed to just stay on a desk, nothing on the sides, of course, and also being able to actually breathe on the top here, or at least get rid of the heat, because it just kind of sandwiches the heat between the server and whatever shelves you have above it. So that just makes me rethink how I actually want to use this, if I want to use it in the future. I'm kind of looking at prices of 4 terabyte NVMe SSDs. Whenever those come down in price, I'll probably upgrade to 4 terabytes in this one here and use it just for cloud storage and use it in another room, isolated completely from other devices so it won't get too hot, and then it should be just fine. But for now, I've actually removed all the NVMe SSDs I had in this one. I had 2 terabyte NVMe SSDs, and those I have moved over to my other QNAP servers. I have the TBS-464. I have 2 of those with room for 2 M.2 NVMe's, and then I've just moved the software or the QTS operating system onto those 2 NVMe SSDs running in RAID 1 in both of my servers. So right now there's actually no storage in this one. But when I took it apart, I did have issues with one of these feet breaking. So I didn't pull it or anything. I just kind of removed it like so, like I did with all the other ones here. And then it just kind of broke off, as you can see here. Tried to glue it, but didn't really succeed. I contacted QNAP, and they actually shipped me 4 new feet. So definitely very good service from QNAP. I was willing to pay for these myself, even though I didn't really break them. They kind of just fell off. So kind of nice that I have 4 new feet. And let's actually try and see if we can install them on here. I believe I have to remove the screws. And let's actually also get inside. You can kind of see the thermal tape, how it actually is pretty unusable after you have mounted M.2 SSDs in here. So definitely make sure you mount SSDs that you are not planning on upgrading in the future, because they get very stuck on that included thermal compound or thermal tape. I have ordered some new thermal tape for this one, so it's ready for whenever I get new M.2 NVMe SSDs. But there's like 2-month delivery time right now, so probably be some times next month I'll get some new thermal tape. But yeah, these screws are not the best design. They're kind of knurling on the outside of the screws, but don't really have much room to get your fingers in here, like so. Let's just get inside. I kind of put tape on top of the thermal compound. You can kind of use some of it, but you can see the one up here is broken a little bit here. So this was damaged, like just removing the M.2 NVMe SSDs. And the SSDs are actually very hard to get out. You kind of have to put your finger in there and kind of slowly just remove it, because it almost like adhesive tape. This one, or these kinds of thermal tape that's included, very, very sticky. So that's a little bit annoying. So definitely make sure you install something you are confident you want to use for a long period of time. But anyways, here is the little fan. Be cool. Like I said, it can go up to, I believe, 6,800 RPMs or so. At least that's what it was telling me inside the software. And that little fan can get so very loud. And this is just 3 months of usage. Don't know if you can actually see, but there's actually quite a lot of dust down there as well. I was hoping for this complete system here to be pretty much close to passively cooled most of the time. Maybe the fan will just run at a lower RPM, and it does so to begin with, around 2,000 RPM. RPM is still noisy, so it's not something I would like to have close to the area where I am recording right now, because the little fan, it is a little bit more noisy than I would have liked. But once it started to get up to the 4,000 RPM, it just gets very, very loud. And 6,000 is just unbearable to listen to. So wanted to put this in my office. I'm not really sure if the fan suddenly can ramp up to the 4,000 RPM and doesn't really ramp down again once the CPU is actually cooled or cooler. It's a little bit weird. It is also a little bit weird that this is, of course, upside down. So this is the bottom of the server. So when you actually put the right way up, you can see the top here. The CPU cooler and everything is upside down, and that also just makes the heat not escape as freely as it would have if, for instance, it was built this way around and there would have been a lot of ventilation in the top, maybe even an aluminium top plate, so you could kind of dissipate some heat. I think that would have been a little bit better design. This is kind of a weird design, because a lot of heat will just get trapped in here from the CPU and the M.2 NVMe SSDs. Mostly just the CPUs was the one that actually had issues with in terms of heat. So it does get very hot right at this point right here. And that is exactly where the CPU is. And it's also a relatively small CPU cooler there. So yeah, not the best design in my opinion. But if you can keep it in an area where you don't have any other stuff also dissipating heat, like for instance, like I said, I had it standing on top of other NAS servers, which was also getting hot. And when this type of design here doesn't really have all the greatest heat dissipation, kind of sucks air in here and blow it out on the other side with that very, very small and tiny fan. All the air coming over the CPU here is actually very hot already from the NVMe SSDs, or as hot as the SSDs get, which was like up to around 55 degrees Celsius in my testing, just in normal usage, so it doesn't really get all that hot. But all the air that is actually sucking in from the side here going over the CPU will already be, let's just say 50-55 degrees Celsius. So it will be a little bit harder to actually cool that down. And I'm also a little bit concerned about dust build-up long-term with this little fan there, just blowing air at 4,000 RPMs. You can see already from 3 month usage, you definitely see a lot of air, or excuse me, a lot of dust on that CPU cooler there. So I'm not 100% ready to actually give it up. I think it still is a nice little compact server, but I just need to place it in another environment in my home. I do have another place to put it. And like I said, I do want to have 4 terabyte NVMe SSDs in here so I can use it for cloud backup. The 2 terabyte RAID 5 system or build I had before only gave me around 5.5 terabyte of usable space, and you shouldn't really use more than like 4 or 4.5 terabyte of that. So getting 4 terabytes in here should give me close to 11.5 terabyte of usable space, maybe like 10 terabyte space that I can actually use. That would be kind of nice, but I'm just following the prices a little bit. If you calculate how much it costs for 2 terabyte versus a 4 terabyte drive, it is still much cheaper to get 2 terabyte drives per terabyte. But anyways, let's just try and actually install this one. So you have this little tab there that's kind of holding the foot in place. You can kind of put it in the screw hole there, or where the screw actually goes, and you should just be able to squeeze it in place. Ah, that was kind of easy. Easy peasy. That's kind of nice. You can actually get new rubber feet if they break. It's not really a big issue, but still, if you are planning to travel with this one, which I think a lot of people could actually do, because it's very small and compact, and if you want to have some storage for video editing on the go, definitely is a very nice solution for that. But for now, it's just going back into its box until prices get a little more reasonable for 4 terabyte drive, and then I think I will get it back into operation. So after a little more than 3 months of usage, I'm not really sure I would recommend this unless you can have it on a tabletop with a lot of ventilation around it and you don't really mind a little bit of noise, then it could be fine. And also if you put it in a server rack and you do have some active cooling in there, it could also be fine there as well. Or if you just have a shelf to put it on where it's not really affected by other devices, heat and so on, it should be fine enough as well. But ASUS Store have actually made some more compelling devices if you're into NVMe storage devices. I can also link those down in the description below if you're interested. But they've made a 6-bay version, but also a 12-bay version with also, which also have a 10 gigabit LAN connection on the back. This one only have 2.5 gigabit LAN connection. So I will probably steer you towards those instead of this one. Have the same CPU and everything, but it is just actually a little bit cheaper or close to the same price for the 6-bay version as the QNAP version here. The 12-bay version is quite a bit more expensive, but I'm actually kind of drooling about that a little bit. Although in my opinion, I think QNAP and QTS is still better for Docker containers because you can actually run a virtual switch on the software. And that means that all of your Docker containers can actually run through a virtual switch. So you can have each Docker container run on its own individual IP address, which is very, very handy because a lot of Docker containers use the same port number. For instance, if you use Nginx and you also use another dashboard, for instance, I use Dashi for my dashboard, and that uses port 80 as default, and Nginx, of course, uses port 80 and 443, and those will just conflict unless I can run them through a virtual switch, software switch, and that way I can actually run those off different IP addresses. And I can just use my firewall or my router to set a IP address specific for those containers and just have a static MAC address, set that inside of the container station. So I kind of like running containers on QNAP. That's been working very well for me personally. I'm sure you can do it with other software and other devices and so on, but this has just been the easiest way of doing it for me personally. So definitely think it is a great device to run containers. So of course it is a limiting factor of this one as well, with compared to like the ASUS Store, where you can actually have up to 16 gigabytes of memory. So if you want to run a lot of containers and also run a few virtual machines, definitely would steer you towards that as well. 8 gigabyte can be a little limiting, even though it is okay for me personally. If you want to run both containers and virtual machines, I definitely think you need more than 8 gigabytes of memory. So unless you don't mind the noise and you can get this as a very good price or good deal, and you know there's something specific by QNAP, QTS software, or like I said, you want that virtual switch functionality to run Docker containers and so on, I would kind of steer you away from this one here. It just gets very hot, very loud, and can be a little bit annoying, even though it has been very stable for me. Just that noise from that little fan never really ramping down again when it gets up to like the very fast RPM. And I also think it's a little bit annoying that the USB 3 are actually in the front. So if you connect something like this coral unit here, it kind of sticks out quite a bit from the front here as well. It kind of ruins the aesthetics a little bit of this neat little setup here. So that's also a little bit annoying. Would have been nice to see those on the back and maybe just have those USB 2.0 on the front instead. But anyways, that's just been my overall review of the QNAP TBS-464 after 3+ months of actually using it, running 24/7. Link down in the description below if you are interested in this one. I can also link the ASUS stores down below, which I definitely recommend over this one, unless you know you really want that software switch or some specific features of the QTS software. But that's pretty much all I have for this video. Hope to see you again in the future one. Until then, take care.